Okay.
All right, welcome back to Sassy AF TV. I officially named the show since last week was so impromptu, it didn't have a name. So we are here today for episode 2, and I'm so excited to interview Heather Duranja. She is the nutrition vixen, and we met on Instagram like, I don't know, a few months ago, but we were just talking before this.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on the show. It takes a lot of courage to do it.
That works. There we go.
Okay.
When you go live, that's just what happens. Thank you. I'm going with I'm sassy AF. So that's what you do.
Love it. I love it. I absolutely
Take the
love
bull
it.
by the horns.
We're both Leos, and so we are women of action. When we have an idea, we typically run with it. And one of the really cool things right now with the moon cycle, these next 3 years are really unforgiving. The universe is not having any kind of forgiveness. And so it wants us to be very decisive. And if we aren't decisive, it's going to kick us in the ass and make us take action. And sometimes it may not be, what we're actually hoping for. So I love the fact that you had this idea and just ran with it. That's exactly what the universe wants you to do.
Oh, I love that. One of the things that spoke to me initially, aside from your love of nutrition, which I'm fascinated with nutrition. I don't think I told you this, but back in my 20s, I actually aspired to get my degree in nutrition, and I wanted to go become a nutritionist. But the reason I didn't is because my bachelor's degree is in communication studies, which meant that I took like 0 science classes. And I realized to become a nutritionist or a dietitian, I would have had to basically redo my entire bachelor education, undergrad education. Right. I was like, I can't do that. That's not feasible. So instead, I've just, read up on nutrition, and I love it, and I'm fascinated with it. But in addition, like, I know you have a passion for crystals and chakras and all this really awesome energy work and breath work, and I'm fascinated by it, and I'm just learning about it now. So I love that side of what you do as well.
I love I'm obsessed, clearly. Unfortunately for myself, this journey of whole well-being, health and wellness, it started for nutrition with me with getting diagnosed with a kidney disease. And so at 18, I got diagnosed with this kidney disease. Couldn't get health insurance because I wasn't a full-time student, got kicked off my parents' health insurance, then had this pre-existing condition and could not get insurance at that point.
Oh my
gosh.
So
that's when I decided, you know what, I'm going to have to be proactive. I'm going to have to figure out what this is, because I don't have the luxury of being able to go to the doctor and ask questions and run tests constantly. I ended up getting pregnant, having to go through clinics, and became very, very ill. After the birth of my first daughter, I went to see my nephrologist, and my nephrologist said to me I was looking at kidney transplant or dialysis within the next 5 years.
Oh my God.
So I said that is not my reality. That is not my truth. I am going to figure this out. So that's where my passion for research began. And that's where my pursuit for knowledge started. And my journey began with nutrition, and then it evolved into the whole exercise and lifestyle components. When my youngest daughter went to kindergarten, I decided to pursue an education. I didn't even know there was such thing as a dietitian at that time. I just knew that all of these amazing things I had learned and implemented in my life had made such a difference. I wanted to impact the health and wellness of others. I realized most people didn't have the passion and the drive that I had to put the kind of work that I did in. And so anyway, I did my undergrad in dietetics, started practicing clinically. I was working with diabetes education week after week. People would come back, they wouldn't make any changes. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? This is not fulfilling. I cannot do this for the rest of my life. Like, I'm giving them all this amazing knowledge and they're not doing anything with it. So that's when I decided that, education is not the problem. We all have a pretty good idea of what we should and should not do when it comes to our eating, behaviors and patterns that are going to be in our best interest. And so anyway, I started looking for a master's program, and I found a master's program that I felt was exactly what I was looking for. And it was called, sorry for the long title, but Multidisciplinary Health Communication Specializing in Behavioral Theory.
Is there
So for
is there like an abbreviation for that?
no, there's not. You should try and
Maybe
fill
make
in
one
those
up.
little boxes, right? It's like, oh my gosh. So
Right.
anyway, I really feel like that's where the nuts and bolts of what I do really lie, in combination with understanding the physiology and the science behind our bodies and how they work, but also taking the psychology and being able to interlap that and being able to communicate that to consumers in a way that is going to make an impact or make them want to take action. So, during my undergrad, or in between my undergrad and master's, I had gone through a divorce. I was super stressed out, doing single mom, had two teenage girls, and I ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. And so when I got that diagnosis, I was devastated, like angry, pissed. And
Especially for
so
someone that's so healthy and focused on health
exactly,
and
that's
wellness and overall well-being. Yeah.
exactly. So for
Right.
me, I was just infuriated. I was like, this doesn't make sense. I don't understand how this could happen. And ultimately, that's when the journey, understanding how stress, sleep, gut health play a role in our overall metabolism. And so that led me down that pathway. And the final chapter has been the whole energy work and understanding how energy is connected to our total well being. And so I have become obsessed with crystals and breath work and the moon. I've always had a thing for, like astrology, but now I
Yeah.
really understand the components and
How it all comes together.
how they're all interconnected and how we are all energy. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It's just transferred from one being to another. And
Right.
most of the time, when we are having physical ailments in our body, it's our body's way of waving red flags and saying, hey,
Right.
hey, you're not listening to me. You're not listening to me. You're not
Hello.
dealing with stuff, you know?
Right.
So, anyway, so I incorporate all of that in my practice, taking into consideration all of the components that make up the whole being and help guide them through being able to really change behavior, starting with the root cause.
Right.
Typically, it's some sort of emotional issue. And being able to help get them on the pathway to, creating a new life for them that is going to be sustainable and fulfilling. And all of the sudden, all of their chronic diseases that they have been struggling with for the last 20 years are no longer an issue. So
Right.
I specifically work with majority women who have autoimmune disease. These
Mhm.
women get these diagnoses that are really traumatic.
Yeah.
They receive this diagnosis much like I did, and we basically accept that as our fate and decide that we're going to have to live this poor quality of life. We're not going to be able to fulfill our dreams. Many women don't have children, or they don't pursue lifelong passions because
Right.
they think that they have this thing, and this thing is preventing them from being able to achieve their dreams. And because they're
Right.
suppressing their dreams, it really then escalates other secondary symptoms within the body. And then typically they're on medications, and it's just this vicious cycle. We're on the hamster wheel and we just keep going crazy.
Right.
So a lot of times, by the time women are in their 50s and their 60s, they've gotten to a point where they're so fed up, they realize that death is knocking on the door and that they have to do something. And so when they come to me, I am so grateful because they're open. They're finally at a place where they are truly ready to make change. And through my experiences, I can help guide them through motivating and inspiring them. Like, look, you don't have to accept this as your fate. Let's get to the root of the problem. Let's work on that. And as you're
Right.
working on that, weight loss just tends to become a secondary component. It's just another thing that happens along the journey that is
Right.
really awesome and fulfilling for them. So I never make it about weight loss. They always come to me because it's about weight loss, but that's never where we start. Most people are like, wait, I thought I hired you so we can talk about food. And I'm like,
Right.
do you really want to be able to have all of your issues around food solved? Because if so, we have to start elsewhere.
Right.
And
Right.
so, yeah.
I
So,
mean, there's so much you just said right there that's like, I want to dive into all of it. And of course, we don't have time for all of it today,
right.
but I mean, the whole body, the emotional component, the education. I mean, at the root, we were just talking before we got started about our kids. And my
Mhm.
kids are still little at 11, 9, and 5. And one of the things that my husband and I have been really focused on in the last 6 to 12 months in particular is educating them on nutrition, because
Mhm.
we both grew up in households where, our parents did the best they could and they didn't do anything wrong, but they
Right.
just didn't have the knowledge themselves. And so the
Right.
fact that, Paul and I are, keep ourselves, in touch and knowledgeable about nutrition, we're trying to pass that information along so that our kids, it's not just about not eating too much sugar or not eating too many French fries, but let's talk about what are macronutrients and what are quantities and portion control, and why do we choose to eat certain things organic, and why
Mhm.
are we making sure that we know where our food comes from, that sustainable food sources, and let's read labels and make sure that there's not too many chemicals in processed foods, etc. So it's really about this education, and I feel like a lot of what you probably deal with your clients, they probably come to you like, yeah, I want to lose weight, but they know nothing, right? Like I'm constantly surprised. I don't know why it still surprises me that at the very basic level, most people I speak to, and you probably have this, they have absolutely no idea what macronutrients are, or what the difference is between a protein, a carb, and a fat, or
Right.
that like certain foods fall into certain categories. I mean, to me,
Right.
I consider it basic knowledge, but most
Well,
people don't have that information.
right. And what flabbergasts me even more is that most people put so much trust into their doctor, they go to
Yeah,
him or her for information pertaining to nutrition, and they really are completely clueless.
right,
They maybe have one semester which addresses maybe a total of 10 hours when it comes to nutrition. And people put them on a pedestal and hold them as, whatever the doctor says is what I am supposed to do. And the doctors truly don't know. And
right,
so that's why, I spent 7 years in an education system dedicated specifically to just nutrition and science and how it all works in the body with chemistry and microbiology and
right,
anatomy and physiology and medical nutrition therapy and blah 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 blah. So when it comes to really understanding nutrition, I've got it down. And so for me, it's hard for me sometimes to understand how little people actually do know, because
right. Oh
it's
my
such a
gosh,
component of me. I mean, it's my life, right? Like I eat,
right,
breathe, live everything nutrition. And
right.
so for me, sometimes it is hard to realize that, when I'm going through someone's application and they're putting stuff down, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, things that I just take for granted that I
Right.
assume everybody just
Everybody knows,
knows,
right?
they
Right.
don't. Yeah. So, yeah. But I think part of the problem is that we like to complicate it.
Oh,
There's so
yeah.
much
We're
information
humans,
out
and that's what
there.
we do.
There's so much information out there. There's a lot of misinformation, and whatever Susie did, lost the weight, people hold that as the Bible, and then they attempt to try and do what Susie did, and then they don't lose the weight, and then they get frustrated, and then they start self-sabotaging, and we just get caught in this vicious cycle that's so hard to get out of. So I think that it's really important to emphasize that when it comes to nutrition is very individualized. Everyone has unique DNA that they are made up of, and
Right.
the way one responds to something does not mean that your neighbor or your sister or your brother or your mother or your father or even your children are going to respond the same way. We all
Right.
have very, very unique needs. We also have very different lifestyle circumstances, and
Mhm.
lifestyle circumstances play such a huge component in how our metabolism is actually functioning.
Right.
So there's a lot to take into consideration when it comes to giving advice. It's very hard to generalize advice because
Right.
it doesn't really work that way. Each person has a different circumstance and they have different things that are going to potentially work for them versus someone else. So,
Right.
that's why I think it's so important that if someone is feeling like crap and they're struggling and they go to the doctor and the doctor says, no, this is just part of the aging process. No,
Right.
it's not.
It's
It's
not.
not how we're supposed to feel. I get so frustrated when I hear that. Um, And, we really have to invest in ourselves and seek out appropriate guidance through, educated individuals who understand the circumstances, understand the anatomy, the physiology of a person's metabolism, and potential things that will potentially work and things that are not going to necessarily
Right.
work. So
Right.
this
No, I think
keto
that's
diet, I just want to, the keto diet. I hate it. I can't wait for it to go away.
yeah.
I pray. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, and I think people have a lot of misconceptions about how, like you said, it has to be individualized. You have to do like what works for your body, and you have to really listen to your body, and you can't, whatever diet, or if there's a fad happening, right? You can't just jump on the bandwagon without doing
No.
your homework and doing the research and understanding how it works, why it works, etc.
Right.
Yeah,
The bottom line is fads, they come, they go, they don't
exactly.
work, they're not sustainable. They're just putting a band-aid on a problem. They're not getting to the root cause, which leads to more frustration and ultimately a lot more metabolic damage. I
Right.
see so many women who come to me that are in the thick of, having multiple autoimmune diagnoses that could
Mm-hmm.
have easily been prevented had they just sought out a professional who knew how to guide them
Right.
in the appropriate way. These, intermittent fasting, keto diets, they typically have really negative impacts on women's physiology long term.
Well,
So,
let's talk about that, because, well, a couple of things. So I've been doing, I've kind of struggled myself with dieting and eating and emotional eating and all that basically my whole life. And
right.
when I was actually talking to a friend about this the other day, and as a kid, I mean, I can remember the first time that I went on a diet. I probably did Slim Fast shakes when I was like in third grade or something.
Wow.
So, I mean, I was doing everything. I did, Slim Fast, and then it was like Nutrisystem, Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers. I did Fen when I was in high school with my
Wow.
mom, because we didn't even
Wow.
know that that was bad at the time. And then, college came, and I was like, anything I could do to get my hand on diet pills that you could buy over the counter. And then the
Mm-hmm.
binge eating, right? And then, I've kind of struggled back and forth. I mean, I've done Weight Watchers more times than you can imagine. I've done balanced eating. Currently, I am following kind of a modified keto, but a
Okay.
lot of greens and a lot of veggies, and, really like clean eating. It's mostly clean eating. And for me, what I took
Mm-hmm.
out was a lot of like the processed foods, and a lot of
Right.
eating like, the thing that what I wanted to also touch on was this idea about snacking and grazing, and how often should you eat, and how does that work, right? Because for me, that's been something that's been always the challenge, is calorie consumption. I mean,
Right.
right at the end of the day, it's math, right?
Right.
Like, how many calories are you consuming is going to impact. But of course, again, that also is different person to person, right? And
Right.
how much
Yeah.
movement you have and how your body functions and all that. So I'd love to get your take on, how does one person kind of assess what works for them? Do you eat 6 small meals a day? Do you eat 3 meals a day? Do you do intermittent fasting? Like, what, there's so much information out there. Like, how do you even know where to begin?
Right. So, one thing I want to address really quick is all of everything that you mentioned starting in third grade, and all of
Mhm.
these things and these initiatives and these really extreme efforts you have made at trying
Right.
to lose weight through your teens, through your 20s, through your
Mhm.
30s. By the time you get into your 40s, they have finally caught up with you. We're
Mhm.
actually seeing it a lot younger in
Mhm.
females, starting as early as their mid 20s to early 30s. And it's creating a lot of infertility issues, a lot of really challenging weight gain issues where they can't get the weight off. And it's because you've done all of these really extreme things over many, many years
Right.
that the body can no longer respond efficiently. We have a very specific hormonal pathway, and when our body senses that it is in a stressed state,
Mhm.
it goes into the survival mode. And so our body doesn't know the difference between physical, mental, and emotional stress. All it knows is that it's in a stress state. And there's a
Right.
very specific hormonal pathway that has to occur in order for life to sustain itself. So if in third grade, you're sending messages to yourself saying, I am overweight, I need to lose weight, I need to reduce my calories. You're putting emotional stress, mental stress, and physical stress on the body at a very, very young age. So
Mm-hmm.
we're constantly in this stress mode. And over time, by the time we get into our 20s and our 30s, the body is no longer working efficiently. The metabolism has been so it's become so dysfunctional
Mm-hmm.
because it has been utilized to just make stress hormones. So sex hormones, DHEA, all of these hormones that control all of these other mechanisms are no longer working optimally and efficiently because we don't have to make babies in order to survive. We don't
Right.
have to have periods in order to survive. There's all these things. We don't have to build muscle in order to survive, but we do need to be able to run away or climb a tree in order to survive.
Right.
So unfortunately, what I end up seeing is that by the time women get to their late 30s, their 40s, they have done so much damage to their adrenal glands, to their thyroid function, that it really is going to take years to undo the damage that they
Mm-hmm.
have created over decades. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
decades. And then if we want to take the whole emotional component of what
Right.
we've been doing to ourselves
Right.
during that whole process, it's really unfortunate. So I would say to somebody who is struggling, who has done all of the things that you have mentioned, and
Right.
maybe they're currently on some sort of keto diet, or they're eliminating all of their carbs, or they're calorie restricting, or they're using exercise, over exercising as a form to try and keep their body in check, that we really need to sit back and evaluate what you've done, where you're at, and
Mm-hmm.
efficiently assess, okay, clearly what you've done is no longer working for you.
Right.
So the approach that has to be taken is very different.
Right.
And a lot of times it's not what we think it is. This is where less is more comes into play. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying less is more in terms of less calories and more exercise. Many different things come into play with that. So it's hard to give generalized advice around eating snacks, because I have certain clients that have certain circumstances where when they come to me and initially they're like, look, I've got this issue, I feel like this, and I want to lose weight. I'm not losing weight. I've tried XYZ. Me encouraging snacking is not going to benefit them. Their
Right.
leptin and their ghrelin are so far out of whack that their body doesn't know what it feels to be satisfied and what it feels to be hungry. So we
What
have to
are
literally, those are our hunger hormones and our satiation
okay.
hormones.
Okay.
And so these things have been so miswired. We
Right.
have a vagus nerve that goes from our brain to our gut, and that is the control center. They go from gut to brain, brain to gut. And so over a lifetime of abusing food, whether it's, going through bouts of calorie restricting and depriving, to overindulging and binging, even bulimia, there's so many different forms of abuse when it comes to food. Most of us have disordered eating behaviors that are deeply rooted in us at a very, very early age. We see our parents' behaviors, we start modeling and emulating those behaviors. We have society messages that we hear in terms of what we think we're supposed to look like, what we think we're supposed to do in order to lose
Right.
weight. So we have all these stories basically that we've been told, and we've accepted them as truth, and we've gone about our lives. It's gotten us to this point where our body is so not connected that it just gives up. It
Right.
waves the red flags and it says, look, I can't keep up with you anymore. Like, this is just too much.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's when chronic disease really starts to set in. And it can be prevented, it can be reversed. However, it's going to take patience. And most importantly, it's going to take you actually being mindful and listening to your body cues. Most
Mm.
people have no clue when they're hungry. They've either subscribed to the story that you're supposed to eat 6 small meals a day, but what they don't realize is that those 6 small days, or those 6 small meals a day that they're supposed to be eating, is with nutrient dense foods that are in controlled portions, and they're having regular exercise. most people don't get more than 3,500 steps a day.
Right.
So
Right.
subscribing to them that they need to be eating 6 meals is like, go ahead and sit there and just, graze all day long. it, it's not a good subscription. It's
Right.
creating a lot of confusion. They're told to do this, but their body is responding this way, but they're so caught up in the story that they refuse to actually listen to what their body is telling them. And then
Right.
we wrap emotions into that, and then we get ourselves in a lot of trouble because then we
Right.
emotionally eat. There was a time when I was going through my master's program, and I was working long, long hours. I was, doing the role of clinical dietitian during the day. I was working nights and weekends as a bartender to make ends meet. I still
Right.
had to raise my daughters and run them from XYZ. I was doing the master's program, had papers to write, homework to do. Life was crazy. And I was sleeping about 2 to 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
So when I would sit down to start writing a paper or do some sort of homework assignment, I was exhausted. I was literally just exhausted. And I would need a distraction. And so I would think, you know what? I'm hungry. I need to go find something. And I'd open up the fridge, I'd open up the pantry, I'd just stand there aimlessly looking like, oh, nothing
Right.
looks good. But then I would sit there and just plow food into my mouth and then go sit back down, pull the computer back up, sit there for about 10 minutes. And then I was like, oh, I need a snack again. And I would be on this vicious cycle for hours, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, I wasn't honoring what my body was really telling me. And my body was telling me, look, bitch, you're overtired. You are exhausted. You're
Right.
underslept. You need a distraction. You need to do something that is
Right.
going to nourish your body. You're not nourishing your body, your mind, and your soul. And so during that period, I ended up putting on like 30 pounds. And at this point, I'm feeling like the biggest hypocrite ever, right? Because here I am, the registered dietitian,
Right.
and I'm counseling people on how to eat and what to eat. And I would get home and I'd just be plowing food in my mouth uncontrollably. And it was
Right.
all related to emotion and needing a distraction from the real problem. If I would have just addressed the real problem, I wouldn't have put myself through all the agonizing pain and then, the months and months and months that it took to get the weight off. So,
Right.
yeah. So,
Wow. I mean, I need like a counseling session just to like deal with my own my own food issues. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Heather, a big impetus for me starting Sassy Healthy Fit is, I want to empower women to take better care of themselves. And I want to encourage women to be their own hero and not be a victim of society, whatever. And a lot for me of my kind of victim mentality that I had in the past that kind of, propelled me into this life that I'm living now and this lifestyle that I'm living now had to do with body image issues all around my weight. And I was always, fearful of being overweight, told I was overweight, felt like I was different, felt like I stood out, felt like there was something wrong with me, felt like I had to diet, like I was never good enough. And I always had to be focused on until I'm skinny enough, I'm not good enough. And I still literally struggle with this daily. I mean, my husband will tell you like how many times I've cried about this, not as much recently, but it's still a struggle. And all these things, it's like, every day it's like, do I track the calories and do I, eat the carbs? Do I not eat the carbs? Then I will read information that, women will talk about, now I'm eating 2,500 calories a day and I'm feeling better and I'm more fit and I'm leaner and blah, blah, blah. And before I was starving myself at 1,200 calories and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm at like 12 to 1,500 and that's like about the most I can do because I'm scared to death to go above that because I'll blow up
right,
like a freaking balloon.
right.
So it's like you said, like it's the stories,
Yeah.
so how do we work through that? And not just for my story, but how do women work through this? How do
So,
we know what's right for us?
So unfortunately, everything I've heard you say is associated with expectation. We
Mhm.
have unrealistic expectation of self. We are
Mhm.
supposed to be superwoman. We're supposed to be able to do X, Y, Z, all the while doing it, having an incredible figure just like Wonder Woman did, and being
Right.
able to fly around with our cape with energy all day long. And the bottom
Right.
line is that's not reality. Those
Right.
are having unrealistic expectations. You are accepting that as the story. So therefore, the root emotional problem comes down to your self-worth.
Right.
You are telling yourself a story that you aren't good enough because you aren't able to obtain all of these unrealistic expectations that you have allowed society to put upon you.
Right.
So, narratives are a huge problem. And the bottom line is, we don't need to be reading articles. We don't need to be doing all of this stuff. If you just invested the time in listening to your body and what
Mhm.
it was actually telling you, problem would be solved. But
Mhm.
instead, we're so busy looking for the effing answer that we
Right.
are ignoring all of the flags in the process. And
Right.
so, but that's been society conditioning, right? We have to know the why. We got to know the why. Well, you know what?
Right.
Fuck the why. We don't need to know the why. All right.
Right.
We
Right.
need to know that we aren't going to accept that and we're going to take action. We
Yeah.
know that what we've been doing up to this point with everything we've been told we're supposed to do isn't working. So we don't need to know why it's not working. What we need to know is that that's not the approach we're supposed to be taking. We need to
Right.
let that go and we need to start really, seeking from within. What is our body really telling us? This aching that I have in my knee, what is this aching that I have in my knee actually telling me from an emotional standpoint that I'm
Right.
denying myself?
Right.
So the bottom line is we overcomplicate it. We set really unrealistic expectations because of these stories that we have accepted as truth that are just completely unrealistic and
Right.
unobtainable.
Right.
So when I work with clients, I help them really get to the root of the problem and figure out what those stories are. Where are these stories coming from? What are these stories so that we can be mindful and aware that these are the stories they're telling themselves and then help redirect their thoughts into a different process. The bottom line is that we are all wired from a neurological perspective. When I talk
Mhm.
about that vagus brain,
Right.
that vagus nervous system that goes from our brain down to our gut, I'm sure you've heard of the central nervous system and the
Right.
parasympathetic nervous system.
Right.
So when a person is stressed out, we are not able to initiate our parasympathetic nervous system because that's our rest and digest state. We have
Right.
to initiate the central nervous system so that we can take action. Well, most of the time, someone's sitting in front of their computer at their desk and they get to the office and they pull up their email and they see that there's 500 emails,
Right.
90 of them are marked urgent. They've got Susie in the background knocking on the door saying, "Hey, do you got a minute?" Husband is texting them saying, "Hey, I forgot Matt's lunch, and there's no money in his account." And you're
Right.
sitting there going, "Oh my God,
Right.
how am I going
Right.
to deal with all of this?" And you're sitting, right? So you're not taking the glucose that's being released into your bloodstream. You're not
Right.
utilizing that for energy to run up a tree or run away. We want to run away, but we're not running away because we've been told we must sit there and we must deal with it.
Right.
So, unfortunately, over long periods of time, that pathway, that response gets the best of us, and it sets us up for failure in so many ways.
Yeah.
So, I don't, there's so much that we could talk about, and I
Right.
don't want to confuse the listeners and get
No,
too sciencey
absolutely.
on them. But the
What
bottom line is that we just don't listen to our own body cues. And if we could just take a step back, let go of the judgment, let go of the stories and the narrative, and just accept ourselves for where we are at, we wouldn't be searching for the next fad diet. We would actually be listening to the body and responding to it appropriately.
So, do you have kind of one first action step that a woman listening is saying, "Oh my gosh, this is me, and
Yes.
I want to listen, but I don't know how to." Number one, I don't know how to listen. So, how do I listen? And number two, once I listen, then what? What do I do? What do I do?
So, lucky for your listeners, I have compiled a really amazing 5 step um, PDF that they can download. And
Awesome.
so, in this PDF, I address the 5 different lifestyles that I feel are most important in terms of our overall metabolism. So, I will start here. We'll talk about this. So, a lot of times when we think we're hungry, we're actually thirsty.
Yep.
And women are the absolute worst with depriving themselves of hydration because they're too damn busy. They don't have time to go to the bathroom. They don't want to have to pull off the side of the road to use a restroom in between taking the kids from school to soccer practice.
Right.
So over time, we deny ourselves of the hydration. 70% of our body is made of water. If we are not appropriately hydrating, that means that more than half of our body is not going to be functioning at an optimal level. So over time with chronic dehydration, systems start to fail. One of the things when we're dehydrated, we have a hormone called aldosterone that gets initiated, and a lot of times we don't know the difference between hydration and hunger. We just think that we're hungry, but what our body is really telling us is, look, lady, you're so dehydrated, you need to stop. But because we aren't being mindful, we're like, oh, I must be hungry. Where's my next snack? Right? And so unfortunately, for me, whenever I start with clients, we have to start with hydration. I think it's funny because we know so much about how the moon plays a role on the ocean tide, right? When there's a full moon, it has an impact on the ocean. So it goes back to energy. We are in denial if we are thinking that we are not being that we're not starting at a cellular place that begins with energy, and 70% of that is dependent upon water.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I know. I mean, I'm very in tune with kind of the moon cycle. And for me, like, I'm really in tune with it from like my menstrual cycle is seriously tied to the moon. I can see a lot of change with that. And I might be the exception, but I'm constantly hydrating with my giant 40-ounce water bottle and going to the bathroom. And I'm like, I don't care if I have to pee every 5 seconds, it's fine.
Right.
But I know that that's not the norm.
So one of the reasons that people fail with hydration is because the approach that they take is not appropriate. As I mentioned earlier, there's a hormone that controls our hydration. It's called aldosterone, and aldosterone is very necessary in order to keep potassium and sodium in balance. Those are the two nutrients that control our heart rhythm. So if these two nutrients get out of balance, it could potentially put us at risk of having a heart attack and dying. So that's why we have this hormonal system that's built in to be able to protect ourselves and keep things in a very narrow, range in order to keep it within homeostasis. So when a person typically is like, okay, well, I need to start drinking water, they probably have been over caffeinating, which caffeine acts as a diuretic and causes us to excrete fluids from the body. So our cells are actually losing hydration instead of actually hydrating. So now they're like, oh, I need to drink water. I need to drink water. So I got to carry the gallon jug around. I got to get through that whole gallon of jug today. This is where I'm starting. And they pound down the gallon of jug and they're pissing every 3 seconds. And they're like, oh my God, that is so miserable. I can't do that tomorrow because I didn't get anything done. So unfortunately, it's because the body is responding to the amount of fluid that's coming in at one time. It needs to slowly adjust to that so it can keep potassium and sodium in level within balance. If we influx all of this fluid, it's going to cause us to lose a lot of sodium, which is going to create a problem for the heart, and the body's going to be like, oh my God, oh my God. So anyway, in this document, one of the tips that I give individuals is, be mindful, assess where you're at. Most people don't even know where they're at when it comes to hydration status. They're like, I don't know, I drink. Well, do you really know how much you drink? No. So just be mindful. Let's see, how much do you drink? And so figure out where your base is. And then from there, slowly increase it anywhere from 8 to 16 ounces a day until you reach that desired goal. And I typically recommend somewhere between 60 and 80 ounces of water. It's very dependent on the person. Sometimes 80 ounces of water can be way too much fluid for an individual, especially if they're having like any kind of thyroid issues. It causes a lot of retention because their body can't clear it out fast enough. So anyway, I put all kinds of fun tips like that in this document that discusses the 5 different lifestyle components that I feel are vital when it comes to the whole body wellness and being able to reset and reboot our metabolisms to get it working in our favor so that we are working smarter, not harder.
So, okay, so here's another tip question. This might be on your
Uh-huh.
sheet. So, this community, we're in-demand women. We are running around. We've got to do all the things like you talked about when you were getting your master's. We're working, we might have kids, we have multiple responsibilities in our community. We're doing all the things. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's just not enough time to eat. And eating can become, even for me, I know it can become a chore. It's the thought of, going to the grocery store, making sure you have the produce on hand, making sure you have, the right proteins and the whole foods and all the things, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
haven't gone bad and you can have them easily accessible. So do you have a tip for the woman that's on the go? She's in demand. She needs to eat her, whole nutritious foods. What's
Mm-hmm.
a simple, sustainable, and fun way that she can have something ready to go on a regular basis?
So I'm a big fan of food prep. I think that food prep is necessary if we want to be prepared. I typically take a Sunday and I'll set aside 2 hours to, do some of that food prep. Um, but if someone doesn't even have time to do the food prep, then things like daily harvest meals can be a really good solution. You're
Yep.
going to pay a little bit more money, or you can run into the grocery store and you can purchase the already packaged vegetables that are cut and washed and ready to go. We have to simplify it. We have to take the obstacles out in order to be able to be consistent. So typically what I end up, when I'm working with busy women who are in high demand and don't have a lot of time, we start with, okay, then you're going to call and you're going to have your groceries delivered. You're going to buy the pre-cut, pre-washed
Right,
forms so that all you have to do is literally portion them out into a baggie or, purchase the individual size so that all you got to do is grab and go.
right,
And as they start putting better nutrients in their body, they start feeling better, which then in turn increases their motivation and their likeliness that they actually want to make effort at doing those things because they see the value in it. So then
right,
all of a sudden we switch off that. I don't need to purchase the pre-made stuff anymore. Now I'm actually taking the time to do this for myself because I
right,
enjoy it, because I understand the value in it. So
right.
it's all in the approach, to be
Yeah.
honest
No,
with you. It's
that's
all
a
in the
really good
approach.
perspective. Yeah. No, I
It's all
agree.
in the
That's a
approach.
good perspective. Right. And it's about, I talk about this all the time. It's about prioritizing and making the choice. We have we have time. I don't know if you just read the article that I put out on time management, but the bottom line is it's about mindset, and how much
It is.
time you have is about being mindful and mindset. So if you want to make the time to do the meal prep and be prepared so that you have the nutritious food that you want to eat and need to eat in your daily life, then you're going
Right.
to set aside the time, whether it's getting up a little bit earlier or setting aside a couple hours on Sunday or whatever, whatever's
Right.
going to work best in your schedule.
Right. So, my biggest piece of advice is this. If someone is struggling and they have really, made all of these attempts at doing fad diets and doing intermittent
All the
fasting and blah,
things.
blah, 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 all the things, right? I would say to that person, it's time for you to really make yourself a priority. You need to invest in yourself. You need to hire a professional who can take all of the guesswork out, be able to come up with a plan, a program, a solution that is going to be realistic for your circumstances to set you up for success. And most
Yeah.
of the time, we don't want to invest in ourselves that way because there is
Right.
so much information out there. We think that we
Right.
can do it on our own. And I
Right.
will tell you, every single effing client that I work with, after a couple weeks in, they always say to me, oh my God, I wished I would have done this so
Started
much sooner. I
early.
wished I would have done this so much sooner. And we're just, as females, we've been conditioned to put our needs last. We are nurturers by nature. We think that we have to run ourselves ragged in order to meet everybody else's needs. But what
Right.
we don't realize is that in the process of doing that, all we're doing is making every single person around us just as miserable as we are, because we're coming from a place of resentment, a
Right.
place of annoyance, a place of not having our cup full. And
Right.
so, if we were to actually take a different approach and say, you know what, I'm going to make me the priority right now. I am going to work on what I need. And once I fulfill my needs, I will be able to address everyone else's needs from a different mindset, from a
Right.
different perspective. And I will be much more efficient at it. I will be much more joyful at it. And that energy is going to be transferred to the rest of the family. So now, we've all seen that sign: when mom's not happy, nobody's happy,
Right.
right? There
Right.
is so much truth to
So
that.
much truth to that.
So, as a
Absolutely.
society, we have to undo the story that mom's needs come last. Bullshit.
Right.
Mom is first.
Mom comes
Mom is
first.
first. If
I
you want to
agree.
have a healthy, sustainable, healthy lifestyle in terms of emotional stability and mental capacity, not to mention the physical component of it,
Right.
mom has to come first in order to meet all of those needs. We, as the generation that we grew up in, our parents subscribed to that. Basically, two working parents,
Right.
super busy, convenient food. We grew up on the TV dinners, the
Yep.
box dinners, and unfortunately in that process we lost all nutrients. And
Right.
so over time, we just became extremely unhealthy, nutrient poor humans. And
Right.
so now we've gotten to a point almost, 40 to 60 years later where we're recognizing, oh God, I guess this isn't working because we all feel like crap, right?
Right. I mean, you
So,
feel just better when you eat whole foods, of course.
right. So we definitely have to change the approach around that. And if
Right.
two parents are going to be working, we have to come up with some solutions that are going to be realistic for that family's needs.
Right.
More often than less, when women are trying to be healthier, they'll come to me and they'll be like, "Well, I'm going to have to cook like 5 different meals." Really? Really?
No.
You're going to cook
Right.
5 different meals? Bullshit. You'll do that for like 2 days and then you're going to be like, I guess I'm not worth it because it's not worth my time to have to cook everyone else different meals. So that's where I take into perspective and consideration what's going to be the best plan for the entire family. How do we set this woman up for success? For
Right.
success.
No, I love that.
And, so
I mean, it has
yeah,
to be that way. It has to be, I mean, simple, sustainable, fun. That's my mantra. I think that
absolutely.
if you don't keep it that way, it's not going to be followed. And it's funny because over the past year and a half or so, I went through a health journey myself and lost about 30 pounds. And
Congratulations.
I had done that many times throughout my life, but this time was much more focused on, the whole body health. But I had so many
Hmm.
people asking me, well, so what do you make for your kids? And I'm like, I make
Hmm.
the same thing I make for me. There's no
Right.
reason that they should eat differently. I mean,
Right.
occasionally they eat, kid food, or I'll make them pasta or something that I'm not necessarily eating. But generally speaking, we all eat the same meals and we eat clean and whole foods, and they know why. And
Yeah.
I don't believe in being a short order cook, or that they
Right.
should processed foods or foods that I wouldn't want to eat just because they're kids and that might not be their first choice. They learn to like it.
Right. So, I think I had a really awesome experience when I was going through my undergrad, actually through my internship, and I had an opportunity to work with a school district that was implementing strategies and programs that were developed over in Italy.
Yeah.
And it was such a neat experience because they really emphasized the importance of getting children emotionally invested in the nutrition
Oh,
process.
that's cool.
And so, if we can emotionally invest our children into the process, the
Right.
likeliness of them being more open minded to the things that they are willing to try and actually liking them is so much greater. But the problem is most of us we aren't emotionally invested, right?
Right. Right.
We're following some subscription for a fad diet and we're told we're supposed to eat XYZ. So we're just going through the motions. We're not even being mindful and aware whether or not we actually enjoy these foods and how they make our bodies feel. So
Right.
if we could really take a step back and emotionally invest ourselves in that process and model those behaviors to our children, you
Right.
would see huge, huge improvements. I got to do so many research studies. The amount of food waste that was occurring in the
Oh my
lunchroom
God. Yeah.
compared to other programs where they
Yeah.
weren't utilizing these kind of strategies, it was absolutely astonishing,
Yeah.
absolutely astonishing. So that's another thing I teach parents is how to get their children emotionally invested. Not
Mhm.
only how to get themselves emotionally invested, but also to
Right.
incorporate the children in that whole process. I
Right.
hear so many women complain about food prep and how,
Right.
you know, well, my kids, I'm trying, and my kids, you know, they need this, they need that channel changed, or they need this toy down, or they need da 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 da. And I'm like, why aren't we investing the kids in the process with you to do food prep? And they're like, oh, no, like, oh my God, then I have to clean up the mess and da 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 da. And so, you know, I help them come up with different ways that they can get the kids included, make it a bonding experience, emotionally invest themselves as well as the children. And it just completely changes the entire outlook over the whole entire process.
Right. Oh, that's
And then
awesome.
they're like, oh my God, this is so much fun. I had a client the other day and she was like, she had the best weekend ever, and she completely took my advice, did the things that I had recommended, included her children in the process. Her children responded in a completely different way. She was
Oh,
like, there wasn't bickering, there wasn't fighting amongst the children, there was intimacy between my husband and I. And it was
oh,
all because the approach that she decided to implement was mindfulness and
right.
being aware. Yeah,
So
it's, you know,
cool.
those are the kind of things that like get me so excited when people
I love
have
it.
those moments and they're like, oh my God, I can do this for the rest of my
Right.
life. And
Well,
that's
your
goal. That's
well,
goal.
your passion. I mean, you're just, so fired up talking about it. I love it. It's
Yeah.
great.
Oh God.
Well,
Yeah.
I know we could go on and on forever about all this stuff. It's fascinating, and I think you've got so much knowledge, and I'm so glad that you shared. I mean, there were so many takeaways I got from this, from our talk today. Tell me, I'd love for you to share, where can people find you and follow you? And then we'll put the PDF in the comments so everybody can
Perfect.
grab a copy of that. So share about
Absolutely.
yourself. How can they follow you, Heather?
So anyone can find me at nutritionvixen.com. And on there, I have, you know, the little links to find me on social media. But basically, it's Nutrition Vixen. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook, all under Nutrition Vixen. And yeah, I've got all kinds of fun stuff I share. I'm really passionate. Today's post was bomb. It was such truth. It just felt so good to get that message out there. And I'm not scared to talk about the things that we aren't talking about that are necessary to be heard. So
You're a vixen. I love it. And you're
yeah,
sassy.
exactly. You got it, girlfriend.
Yep,
100%.
yep. Well, and I just to give a plug for your YouTube, I've watched several of your videos from meal prep to ideas about exercise to ideas about, just in general food concepts, not just meal prep. So I know you bring a ton of value, and I'm so grateful for the fact we've met and that you were here today and just
Absolutely.
everything that you shared. I'm so appreciative of your time and your energy and just your wisdom, because
Oh,
we
thank
all
you.
need more information about how to take good care of ourselves, mind,
Absolutely.
body, soul, and
Absolutely.
nutrition is a huge factor in so much of our
Absolutely.
health that I don't think it's taken seriously enough. And so I hope that, people are really listening and absorbing what you're saying, because you have so much
Right.
value to what you teach.
Thank you. Well, and I also want to just say thank you to you for creating this TV show so that you have an outlet to be able to get this information to more people. And I appreciate you inviting me on
Oh,
to share
you're
my
so
passion with everyone.
Yay!
So you keep up the good work, sister. You're
Awesome.
doing amazing, amazing things. I'm very
Thanks.
proud of you. And I'm
Thanks.
honored to be able to call you a friend.
Thank you. Same here. So glad to have you here today. And anyone watching, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe. If you're watching this on Facebook, make sure you're following Heather at Nutrition Vixen, Sassy Healthy Fit, and you're linked up everywhere you need to find us. I'll put that PDF in the comments. And thank you so
Awesome.
much for being here today. We'll
Thank
talk to you
you.
soon.
All
Bye.
right. Bye, everyone.
All right.